Imagine standing at the edge of the known world, where the horizon dissolves into endless white and the sky feels impossibly close. There are no cities, no roads, no comforting signs of life, only ice, wind, and silence, so deep it feels alive. This is the Arctic, a place humanity has long romanticized as a frontier of discovery. But beneath that romantic vision lies a harsher truth. For those who live and work inside isolated polar research stations, the Arctic is not just a scientific challenge, it is a psychological crucible. Here, isolation is absolute, rescue is uncertain, and the environment itself seems indifferent to human survival. The question is not whether the cold can kill you, but what the isolation might do to your mind long before that. Throughout history, polar exploration has pushed humans beyond their natural limits. Early expeditions spoke of madness, despair, and unexplainable fear creeping into the camps long before supplies ran out. Modern research stations are safer, warmer, and technologically advanced, yet the core problem remains unchanged. The human brain was never designed for months of confinement, darkness, and sensory deprivation. When the sun disappears for weeks at a time, when storms erase all sense of direction, and when the world outside your walls becomes uninhabitable, something inside begins to shift. Scientists arrive prepared to study ice cores, climate patterns, and atmospheric data, but few are truly prepared for the mental toll of existing in a place where time itself feels distorted. Before we descend deeper into these true accounts, welcome to True Terror Files Official, where we explore documented psychological horror, unexplained encounters, and the unsettling edges of human experience. If stories rooted in reality unsettle you more than fiction ever could, make sure to subscribe and stay with us. These aren't campfire stories. These are accounts from people who are trained to observe, measure, and explain, and who still walked away questioning what they experienced. Now ask yourself this: when stripped of routine, comfort, and human connection, how stable is the human mind really? Inside an Arctic research station, life follows rigid schedules designed to preserve sanity, meals at exact times, tasks assigned down to the minute, exercise routines enforced not for fitness, but survival. Yet even with structure, the mind begins to rebel. Researchers have documented a phenomenon known as polar madness, a slow psychological erosion caused by prolonged isolation, monotony, and sensory deprivation. Colors disappear, sounds vanish, days blur together until time loses meaning. The brain, desperate for stimulation, begins to create it. Shadows feel intentional. Ordinary noises gain threatening patterns. Thoughts loop endlessly, turning inward with nowhere to escape. Anonymous reports from multiple stations describe similar experiences. A scientist becomes convinced that their colleagues are whispering about them, despite evidence to the contrary. Another reports intense emotional numbness, followed suddenly by uncontrollable panic attacks with no clear trigger. Sleep cycles collapse. Dreams bleed into waking hours. One researcher described standing in a hallway, unable to remember why they were there, gripped by the certainty that something terrible had already happened, though nothing had. These are not weak minds breaking. These are trained professionals encountering the limits of human cognition under extreme conditions. Social dynamics also fracture under pressure. Minor disagreements escalate into lasting hostility. Silence becomes punishment. Isolation within isolation forms as individuals retreat inward. The station, meant to be a refuge from the deadly cold outside, transforms into a pressure chamber. Researchers have admitted that during the darkest months, they began to fear their own thoughts more than the environment. When the mind becomes both prisoner and jailer, reality itself feels unstable. And this is where the dread truly begins, not with monsters or myths, but with the realization that your own perception can no longer be trusted. As psychological strain intensifies, something stranger begins to surface: reports of experiences that resist easy explanation. Across multiple Arctic stations, researchers have described hearing footsteps outside during storms where no one could survive. Others report metallic knocking sounds echoing through the ice beneath the station, rhythmic and deliberate, stopping the moment someone investigates. In some cases, these sounds repeat night after night, slowly eroding nerves. Official explanations range from ice shifts to thermal contraction, yet those who experienced it insist the patterns felt intentional, almost observant. Visual anomalies are equally disturbing. Scientists have reported seeing figures at the edge of visibility, dark shapes standing motionless against the snow, vanishing when approached. Cameras often fail to capture anything unusual, reinforcing the unsettling possibility that these experiences exist only in the observer's mind. Yet shared experiences complicate that explanation. Entire teams have described simultaneous feelings of being watched, an unshakable presence just beyond perception. When multiple people experience the same unease at the same time, doubt begins to creep in. Is this mass psychological stress or something else entirely? Rational minds search for explanations: sleep deprivation, sensory hallucinations, environmental illusions. And yet, many researchers admit that these explanations feel insufficient in the moment. The Arctic does not behave like familiar environments. Sound travels unpredictably. Light refracts strangely. The ice itself moves, groans, and fractures like something alive. Even so, the lingering question remains: when fear feels external rather than internal, when dread seems to emanate from the landscape itself, can science truly explain everything? Or are there experiences that exist in the gap between data and perception? The Arctic is not empty, it is simply vast beyond comprehension. Beneath the ice lie shifting tectonic plates, ancient seabeds, and ecosystems still barely understood. The environment constantly reminds researchers of their insignificance. Sudden whiteout blizzards erase the world in minutes. Ice cracks beneath structures without warning. The station shudders, groans, and settles like a living organism. In such conditions, powerlessness becomes a constant companion. No matter how advanced the technology, survival depends on forces that cannot be controlled. Local legends, often dismissed by science, quietly circulate among researchers during long nights. Stories of places where compasses fail, regions avoided by indigenous travelers for generations, areas where sound behaves unnaturally, or where animals refuse to cross. While researchers publicly reject superstition, privately, these stories take root. When isolation strips away certainty, the unknown becomes heavier. The Arctic feels less like a location and more like an entity, ancient, observing, indifferent. This perception alone is enough to destabilize even the strongest minds. Here, dread is not explosive, it is slow and suffocating. It grows in silence, fed by darkness and reinforced by the environment's refusal to acknowledge human presence. The longer researchers remain, the more the Arctic feels like a place humans were never meant to inhabit. And that realization carries its own existential terror, that knowledge and progress may not protect us from places that simply do not care whether we exist at all. When researchers finally leave the Arctic, the cold often follows them home, not in their bodies, but in their minds. Many report lingering anxiety, vivid dreams of endless white landscapes, and an enduring discomfort with silence. Some never return to polar work again. Others feel an inexplicable pull to go back. Despite the fear, the Arctic changes people, not through violence, but through exposure to extremes that strip life down to its rawest elements. These stories remain difficult to share. To admit psychological fracture is still stigmatized, especially among scientific communities built on control and rationality. Yet the truth is undeniable. Isolation, darkness, and the vast unknown can erode even the most disciplined minds. The Arctic abyss is not just a physical environment, it is a mirror, reflecting humanity's vulnerability back at itself. And that may be its greatest horror of all. So now we ask you, how would you handle absolute isolation? What would your mind create in the absence of comfort, color, and connection? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like these stay with you long after the screen goes dark, subscribe to True Terror Files Official, because the most terrifying stories are the ones that are true.